The challenger. The roaring crowd filled the air with deafening noise as Vera stood tall in the center of the alien arena. She was Xarthan, a race known for their strength, speed, and unmatched combat skills. Vera was no ordinary Xarthan. She was the best. Her victories were legendary, and her name struck fear into the hearts of even the bravest warriors. Her golden armor gleamed under the bright lights of the arena. She raised her spear, and the crowd chanted her name. This was her domain, and no one had ever defeated her. She smirked as the gates on the other side of the arena began to open. Another challenger, another easy victory. But then she saw him. A human stepped into the arena, his figure small compared to the towering warriors she was used to facing. He wore no armor, just a simple black combat suit that hugged his lean frame. His hands were empty. No weapon, no shield. The crowd fell silent, confused and disappointed. A human. Surely, this was a joke. Vera tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her sharp yellow eyes. Is this some kind of insult? She called out, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. They send a fragile human to fight me. The human didn't respond. He walked calmly to the center of the arena, his gaze fixed on her. His face was calm, almost bored, as if he didn't care about the thousands of eyes watching him. He stopped a few paces away from Vera and stood still, his hands at his sides. "Do you even know who I am?" Vera asked, gripping her spear tightly. "I am Vera the Unbroken. No one has defeated me. You have no chance, human." The man finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "I know exactly who you are. And I don't need a chance, I just need a moment." Vera narrowed her eyes, unsure whether to laugh or feel insulted. Bold words for someone who won't survive the next 5 minutes. The crowd cheered as the fight began. Vera lunged forward, her spear aimed straight at the human's chest. It was a move she had perfected over years of combat, fast and deadly. No one had ever dodged it. But the human moved. He sidestepped with such ease, it was as if he knew what she was going to do before she did it. Vera stumbled slightly, caught off guard, and spun around to face him. He hadn't even raised his hands. He just stood there, watching her. The crowd gasped. No one had ever avoided Vera's first attack like that. "That was lucky," Vera growled, her pride stung. She charged again, swinging her spear in a wide arc, meant to cut him down in one blow. But again, the human dodged. This time, he ducked low, the spear passing harmlessly over his head. He stepped back, keeping his distance. "What's the matter?" the man asked, a faint smile on his lips. "You seem slow." Vera's face burned with anger. She roared and attacked with a flurry of strikes, her spear moving faster than the eye could follow. But the human was faster. He weaved through her attacks like water flowing around rocks. It was infuriating. "You're just running," Vera shouted. "Fight me." The human stopped suddenly, his stance relaxed. "Why should I? You're beating yourself." Vera blinked, momentarily confused. Her breathing was heavy, her muscles tense. She realized she was already tiring, something that had never happened this early in a fight. The human, on the other hand, didn't even look winded. "Who are you?" she demanded, lowering her spear slightly. "What are you?" The man's smile widened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Vera raised her spear, ready to strike, but before she could move, the human acted. With a speed she couldn't comprehend, he grabbed the shaft of her spear and twisted. The weapon flew out of her hands, clattering to the ground. In the same motion, he stepped closer, his face now inches from hers. "Strength isn't everything," he said quietly, his eyes locking onto hers. "You rely too much on power. That's why you'll lose." Before Vera could respond, he stepped back and turned his back to her, walking away as if the fight were over. The crowd erupted in confusion and anger. What was he doing? The match wasn't finished. "Come back here," Vera shouted, picking up her spear. "We're not done." The human stopped and looked over his shoulder. "We are. You just don't know it yet." And with that, he walked toward the exit, leaving Vera standing in the center of the arena, stunned and humiliated. The crowd's cheers turned to murmurs as they tried to understand what had just happened. For the first time in her life, Vera felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. Who was this human? How had he defeated her without even throwing a punch? And most importantly, what would it take to prove him wrong? As the gates closed behind him, Vera made a silent vow. She would find out the truth about this human, and she would defeat him, no matter what it took. The human's secret. The training room was silent, except for the soft hum of energy fields lining the walls. Vera stood in the center, staring at her reflection in the polished floor. She hated how the memory of that fight clung to her. She could still see him, calm, confident, untouchable. It wasn't just that she had lost. She couldn't figure out how. The door slid open with a hiss, and there he was again. Mark, the human, the one who had humiliated her in front of thousands. He strolled in like he owned the place, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his black combat suit. "Why are you here?" Vera growled, turning to face him. "Haven't you embarrassed me enough?" Mark leaned against the wall, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You wanted to talk, didn't you? Or was that spear-throwing your way of asking questions?" Vera clenched her fists. She had asked the arena officials for a rematch, but instead they had sent him to her private quarters. "I want answers," she said, her voice sharp. "No human should be able to do what you did. You're hiding something." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Am I? You're not faster than me. You're not stronger than me. So how did you beat me?" Mark pushed off the wall and walked toward her, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. "You're right," he said. "I'm not faster. I'm not stronger. But I'm smarter." Vera scoffed. "Smarter? Intelligence doesn't win fights. Strength does." "Does it?" Mark tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd already solved. "Tell me something, Vera. How many fights have you won by brute force alone?" "All of them," she shot back. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. "Exactly. You've never had to think. You've never had to adapt. You fight like a hammer, smashing everything in your way. But what happens when you meet something you can't smash?" Vera's jaw tightened. "You think you're that something. You're just a human. Fragile. Weak." Mark chuckled, and it irritated her more than she cared to admit. "Fragile, sure. Weak? No. Humans don't survive because we're strong. We survive because we're stubborn. We adapt. We figure things out. That's why you lost, Vera. You didn't lose to my strength. You lost to my mind." Vera took a step closer, her towering frame looming over him. "Then prove it. Fight me again. Show me this mind of yours." Mark sighed and shook his head. "Why?" "So you can lose again. You don't need another fight. You need to learn." "Learn what?" Mark's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Vera saw something beneath his calm exterior, something dark. "You think you're the toughest because you've never faced anything harder than yourself. But out there," he pointed toward the stars visible through the window, "out there, strength means nothing. You'll face things you can't punch or stab or crush. Things that'll rip you apart without even touching you. And when that happens, your strength won't save you." Vera stared at him, her pride warring with the unsettling truth in his words. She hated that he made sense. She hated that he made her feel small. "You sound like you've faced these things," she said cautiously. Mark's expression softened, but there was a shadow in his eyes. "I have. And I'm still here. That's the difference between us, Vera. You fight because you've never had to fight to survive. I fight because I've had no other choice." The room was silent again, the weight of his words hanging between them. Vera didn't know what to say. For the first time, She felt like she was standing in front of someone who had truly lived, someone who had faced things she couldn't even imagine. Finally, she crossed her arms and raised her chin. "Then teach me. If you're so smart, prove it. Show me how to fight like you." Mark studied her for a long moment, as if deciding whether she was worth the effort. Then he smiled, but it wasn't mocking this time. It was almost respectful. "All right," he said, "but it won't be easy. I'm not here to hold your hand." "Good," Vera replied. "I wouldn't want you to." Mark chuckled and turned toward the door. "Meet me at sunrise, outside the arena, and bring your toughest weapon." "Why?" Vera asked, suspicious. "Because we're not fighting in here," Mark said without looking back. "We're going to the jungle." With that, he walked out, leaving Vera alone with her thoughts. For the first time in her life, she wasn't preparing for a fight to win. She was preparing for a fight to learn. And somehow, that scared her more than any opponent ever had. The story behind the strength. The jungle was alive with sound. The hum of alien insects, the rustle of massive leaves in the wind, and the distant growl of predators. Vera crouched on a thick branch, scanning the forest floor below. Her golden armor was scratched and dented from hours of navigating the dense terrain. She was frustrated, exhausted, and most of all, annoyed at the human below her. Mark leaned casually against a tree, chewing on some strange root he had found. He looked far too relaxed for someone who had just walked through one of the deadliest jungles in the galaxy. No armor, no weapon, just that same calm expression that made Vera want to throw him off the nearest cliff. "You're not even trying," she hissed, dropping down from the branch and landing with a thud. "Why do you keep slowing us down?" Mark glanced at her and shrugged. "Why are you always in a hurry? Survival isn't a race." "This isn't survival," Vera snapped. "This is a waste of time. You said you were going to teach me something. So far, all you've done is wander around like we're on a sightseeing trip." Mark smirked and tossed the root aside. "Patience, warrior princess. The jungle isn't just about what you can see. It's about what you don't see. That's where the real danger is." Vera rolled her eyes. "I've survived countless battles. I don't need a lecture on danger." Mark stepped closer, his tone suddenly serious. "Battles are predictable. Your enemy is right in front of you, and you know what they want. But out here, the enemy doesn't care about your strength. It doesn't care about your reputation. It just waits for you to make a mistake." Vera opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, Mark raised a hand, signaling for silence. His eyes darted to the treetops above them. Vera followed his gaze, her instincts kicking in. She heard it then, a faint rustling, almost too soft to notice. "Don't move," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. Something massive shifted in the canopy. Vera's grip tightened on her weapon, every muscle in her body ready to spring into action. But Mark didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he crouched low and gestured for her to do the same. Reluctantly, Vera obeyed, her pride chafing at the idea of taking orders from him. She watched as a creature emerged from the shadows, a predator with 6 legs, covered in dark scales that blended perfectly with the jungle. Its eyes glowed faintly as it scanned the ground. Vera had faced beasts like this before. She knew she could take it down with a single strike. But as she prepared to attack, Mark grabbed her arm. "Don't," he hissed. "You'll only make it worse." "Worse," she whispered back, glaring at him. "I can kill that thing in seconds." "That's not the problem," Mark said, his voice calm but firm. "Look closer." Vera frowned and shifted her focus. That's when she saw it, another set of glowing eyes behind the first creature. And another. And another. There wasn't just one predator. There was an entire pack, hidden in the shadows, watching their every move. Her heart sank as she realized the truth. If she had attacked, the pack would have swarmed them before she could even lift her weapon again. Mark released her arm and nodded toward the ground. Slowly, carefully, he began to back away, moving with deliberate steps. Vera followed his lead, her pride momentarily forgotten in the face of this new danger. When they were far enough from the predators, Mark finally spoke. "That's your first lesson. Strength doesn't matter if you don't know what you're up against." Vera didn't respond immediately. She hated admitting he was right, but she couldn't deny the evidence. "Fine," she muttered. "What's the next lesson?" Mark smiled, but there was no smugness in it this time. "The next lesson is why humans survive when we shouldn't." He sat down on a large rock, gesturing for her to join him. Reluctantly, she sat across from him, her weapon resting on her knees. "Tell me," she said, "what makes you so special?" Mark's expression grew serious. "Humans aren't strong. We're not fast. Compared to most species, we're fragile. But we have one thing no one else does: adaptability. We learn from failure. We don't give up, no matter how bad things get. That's how we survive." Vera snorted. "That doesn't sound like a strength. It sounds like desperation." "Maybe it is," Mark admitted, "but desperation keeps you alive. I've been through things that would have broken anyone else. I've lost everything more times than I can count. But I'm still here." For a moment, Vera saw something in his eyes, a deep pain he was trying to hide. She wanted to ask about it, but before she could, he stood up and stretched. "Come on," he said. "We've got a lot more jungle to cover. And if you're lucky, you might even survive." Vera narrowed her eyes but followed him anyway. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But for the first time, she found herself wanting to understand him. Because if what he said was true, then humans were far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The unlikely alliance. The ground beneath Vera's feet felt unnaturally soft, like walking on spongy moss, but every step sent faint vibrations through the earth. Mark had warned her not to step too hard, not to make too much noise, but she hated the way he acted like he knew everything. "This is pointless," she muttered, pushing aside a massive fern that glowed faintly under the pale light of the alien moon. Mark, crouched a few feet ahead of her, looked back with a sly grin. "You say that a lot. Beginning to think that's your catchphrase." Vera scowled. "If you had told me we were going into this death trap for training, I would have brought an army instead of following you." Mark laughed softly and turned back to the jungle. "An army would only attract more trouble. Besides, you don't need an army. You've got me." She wanted to retort, but before she could, Mark raised his hand in a sharp gesture for silence. He crouched lower, motioning for her to do the same. She hesitated, her pride refusing to let her follow his lead so easily. "Now," he whispered, his tone firm. Reluctantly, she crouched beside him. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark pointed ahead. Through the dense vegetation, Vera saw a strange structure, half-buried ruins glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. Vines and roots had taken over most of the structure, but its sharp angles and strange symbols suggested it was not a natural formation. "What is that?" Vera asked, her warrior instincts sharpening. "An outpost," Mark replied. "Or what's left of one. Old. Very old." Vera's eyes narrowed. "You've been here before." Mark didn't deny it. "Once. Years ago. Didn't have time to explore it back then. Too busy trying not to die." "You mean this place is dangerous?" Mark shot her a look. "Do you really need me to answer that?" She ignored his sarcasm and studied the ruins. Something about them felt wrong. The air was colder here, the sounds of the jungle muted. Even the light seemed dimmer. "We shouldn't go in," she said, surprising herself. Vera the Unbroken wasn't afraid of anything. But this place, this was something else. Mark stood, brushing dirt off his knees. "You're right. We shouldn't." Vera blinked. "Wait. What?" He glanced at her, his expression serious. "We shouldn't go in. But we're going to anyway." Before she could argue, Mark started toward the ruins, moving with the quiet confidence that infuriated her. Gritting her teeth, Vera followed. As they approached, the symbols on the ruins seemed to shift, their shapes twisting as if alive. Vera tightened her grip on her weapon. "Stay close," Mark said, his voice low. "I don't need your protection," Vera snapped. Mark didn't look back. "It's not you I'm worried about." The entrance to the ruins was a jagged opening, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Mark ducked inside first, and Vera followed, her eyes adjusting quickly to the dim blue glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Inside, the air was heavy, almost suffocating. The walls were lined with more shifting symbols, and the faint hum of energy filled the space. "What is this place?" Vera asked, her voice echoing slightly. "An outpost," Mark repeated, "built by an ancient race. No one knows what happened to them, but they left these scattered across the galaxy." "Why?" Mark paused, turning to look at her. "To warn us, or maybe to trap us. Depends on how you look at it." Before Vera could respond, the hum grew louder. The walls seemed to pulse, the symbols glowing brighter. "Mark," she said, gripping her weapon tighter. "What's happening?" Mark's jaw tightened. "We've been noticed." The floor beneath them trembled, and a cold wind rushed through the ruins, though there were no openings. Vira's instincts screamed at her to run, but Mark didn't move. "Stay calm," he said, his voice steady. A sudden light filled the room, and a figure appeared, tall, thin, and made entirely of shifting energy. It looked humanoid but alien, its face featureless except for two glowing orbs where eyes should have been. "State your purpose," the figure said, its voice echoing in a way that made Vera's skin crawl. Mark stepped forward, raising his hand slowly. "We seek knowledge, nothing more." The figure's glowing eyes fixed on Vera, and she felt an unnatural pressure in her mind, as if something were trying to peer into her thoughts. She snarled, raising her weapon. "Don't," Mark warned. "Why not?" she snapped. "Because if you attack, it'll kill us both," he said calmly. Vera hesitated, lowering her weapon slightly. The figure tilted its head, as if curious. "Humans," it said, its tone almost amused. "Always meddling." Mark smirked. "We're good at that." The figure flickered, its form becoming unstable. "You should not have come here," it said. "But now that you have, you will not leave unchanged." Before either of them could respond, the figure vanished, and the ruins began to shake violently. "Time to go," Mark shouted, grabbing Vera's arm and pulling her toward the exit. As they ran, the walls around them began to collapse, the glowing symbols fading into darkness. Vera didn't look back, focusing on the path ahead. When they finally stumbled out of the ruins and into the jungle, Vera turned to Mark, breathing hard. "What was that?" Mark didn't answer immediately. He stared back at the ruins, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "That was just the beginning." Vera glared at him. "You knew this would happen." Mark shrugged. "I had a feeling." For the first time, Vera wondered if following this human had been a mistake. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back now. The unseen enemy. Vera had always prided herself on her sharp instincts. In countless battles, they had saved her life. But now, in the eerie silence of the jungle, her instincts were screaming. And for once, she couldn't tell what the danger was. She turned to Mark, who was crouched by a fallen tree, examining something with that maddening calmness of his. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. "Looking," he said without glancing up. "For what?" "For the thing that's hunting us," Mark replied, his tone so casual it made her grip her weapon tighter. Vira's eyes scanned their surroundings. The jungle was alive with movement. Branches swayed, leaves rustled, and shadows danced under the dim green light filtering through the canopy. But nothing seemed out of place. "I don't see anything," she muttered. "That's the point," Mark said, finally looking up at her. "It doesn't want you to see it." Vera growled in frustration. "If you know what it is, just say it. Stop speaking in riddles." Mark stood and dusted his hands off. I don't know exactly what it is. Could be a predator. Could be a drone. Could be something worse. Worse. Yeah, he said, meeting her gaze. Something smart. Vera's grip tightened on her spear. She hated this feeling. The not knowing. The waiting. She preferred her enemies to be right in front of her. Something she could hit. Stay close to me, Mark said, stepping into a dense thicket of vines. I don't need your protection, Vera snapped, following him reluctantly. Mark glanced over his shoulder with a faint smirk. No, but I might need yours. Before Vera could respond, a strange sound cut through the air, a low metallic hum that seemed to vibrate inside her skull. She froze, her eyes darting around. What is that? She whispered. Mark's expression darkened. Trouble. The hum grew louder, and Vera caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. It was fast, too fast to make out clearly. But she saw flashes of silver and blue, like polished metal reflecting light. It's circling us, Mark said, his voice calm but tense. Don't move. Don't give it a reason to attack. Vera's pride bristled. I don't freeze, human. I fight. And that's exactly what it's waiting for, Mark said sharply. This thing, whatever it is, isn't just a beast. It's thinking. Watching. If you attack, you'll give it the advantage. Vera hesitated, torn between her instincts and his warning. Then, from the shadows, the thing emerged. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. It moved like a predator, but gleamed like a machine. Its body was sleek and insect-like, with sharp, angular limbs that glowed faintly at the joints. Its head was featureless, save for a single glowing red line where eyes might have been. What is that? Vera breathed. Mark's jaw tightened. A remnant. A what? Something left behind by the ones who built those ruins, he explained. An AI. Maybe. Or something worse. Whatever it is, it doesn't like intruders. The remnant tilted its head, the red line flickering as if scanning them. Then, without warning, it lunged. Vera reacted instinctively, swinging her spear with all her strength. The weapon connected, but instead of piercing the creature's metallic shell, it bounced off with a loud clang. It's armored, she shouted, jumping back. Yeah, I noticed. Mark called, already moving. He didn't attack. Instead, he darted around the remnant, staying just out of its reach. Vera growled in frustration. She wasn't used to running from a fight, but Mark seemed to have a plan, or at least she hoped he did. Keep it distracted, he shouted. What do you think I'm doing? Vera snarled, dodging one of the remnant's razor-sharp limbs. Mark darted toward a cluster of glowing plants, grabbing one and crushing it in his hand. A thick, sticky liquid oozed from the plant, and he smeared it onto the tip of a broken branch he had picked up earlier. Here, he shouted, tossing the makeshift weapon to Vera. She caught it mid-air, her instincts taking over. Without hesitating, she plunged the branch into one of the glowing joints on the remnant's leg. The creature let out a high-pitched screech, its movements suddenly jerky and uncoordinated. It's working, she shouted. Good, Mark said, grabbing her arm. Now run. Vera hesitated, glancing back at the wounded remnant. She wanted to finish it, to prove she could, but the look in Mark's eyes stopped her. There's never just one, he said. As if on cue, another hum filled the air. Then another. Vera's heart sank as more remnants emerged from the shadows, their red eyes glowing like tiny stars in the darkness. Move, Mark shouted, pulling her with him. They ran, dodging trees and leaping over roots as the remnants gave chase. The hum of their pursuers grew louder, and Vera could feel the vibrations of their footsteps in the ground. We can't outrun them, she shouted. We don't have to, Mark said, his eyes scanning the terrain ahead. We just have to outsmart them. Vera didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Outrunning machines was one thing. Outsmarting them, that was impossible. But as Mark veered toward a narrow ravine, She realized he wasn't planning to fight fair. "Jump!" he yelled, diving into the ravine without hesitation. Vera followed, her body twisting midair as she landed in a roll. She looked up just in time to see the remnants pause at the edge of the ravine, their glowing eyes scanning for them. Mark crouched beside her, catching his breath. "That'll slow them down. For now." "For now," she echoed, glaring at him. He grinned, that maddening confidence returning. "Welcome to survival, Vera. It's not about winning. It's about living long enough to fight another day." She stared at him, torn between punching him and laughing. Maybe, just maybe, this human wasn't as fragile as she thought. The rescue. The air inside the ancient chamber was unnaturally cold, and the dim blue light from the walls cast eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. Vera stood at the entrance, her heart pounding, as she looked at what lay ahead. Mark was suspended in the center of the room, his arms and legs bound by beams of glowing energy. He looked small and fragile in the grasp of the massive machine that loomed above him, an enormous construct of metal and light, humming with power. It was unlike anything Vera had ever seen, a twisted blend of technology and something almost alive. "Human detected," the machine's voice echoed, mechanical and emotionless. "Analyzing DNA. Anomaly confirmed." Mark's head lifted weakly, his face pale but defiant. "You're wasting your time," he spat. "You'll get nothing from me." The machine didn't respond to him. Instead, its glowing red eye turned toward Vera, who gripped her weapon tightly. "Sarthan detected," it said. "Irrelevant species. Leave now, or be terminated." Vera stepped forward, her golden armor catching the blue light. "Let him go," she demanded, her voice steady. The machine didn't move. "The human is necessary. You are not. Leave." Mark's voice cut through the tension. "Vera, don't." But she was already moving. With a roar, she charged the machine, her spear glowing with energy as she thrust it at one of its exposed joints. The impact sent sparks flying, but the machine barely flinched. "Hostile action detected," it announced. "Neutralizing threat." From the walls, mechanical tendrils shot out, aiming for her. Vera dodged the first two, her agility unmatched, but a third tendril caught her arm, pulling her off balance. She twisted, slicing through it with her blade, but more tendrils replaced it, each faster and more precise than the last. "You can't fight it head-on," Mark shouted, his voice strained. "It's not just a machine. It's thinking." "I don't care," Vera growled, slashing another tendril as she closed the distance between her and Mark. "I'm not leaving you behind." The machine's red eye glowed brighter, and the chamber shook as it extended more of its limbs, forming a barrier between Vera and Mark. "You are not strong enough," it said, its voice cold and absolute. Vera froze for a moment, her grip tightening on her weapon. The words struck a nerve, a sharp reminder of her earlier defeats, but this time she didn't let them sink in. Instead, she smiled, a fierce, defiant grin. "Strength isn't everything," she said, repeating Mark's words back to the machine. The machine paused, as if considering her statement. That moment of hesitation was all she needed. She dropped her weapon, grabbing one of the broken tendrils from the ground. With a battle cry, she leaped onto the machine, using the tendril to climb its massive frame. It swayed and twisted, trying to shake her off, but she held on with sheer determination. "What are you doing?" Mark yelled, his voice tinged with both fear and admiration. "Improvising," she called back, reaching a glowing panel on the machine's side. Vera didn't understand the symbols on the panel, but she didn't need to. She drove the sharp end of the broken tendril into the glowing circuitry, twisting it with all her strength. Sparks exploded, and the machine let out a deafening screech. "System compromised," it announced, its voice glitching. "Critical failure." The energy beams holding Mark flickered and disappeared, and he dropped to the floor with a grunt. Vera jumped down as the machine began to collapse, its limbs thrashing wildly. She grabbed Mark's arm, pulling him to his feet. "Time to go," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Together, they sprinted toward the exit as the chamber collapsed around them. The walls cracked, and debris rained down, but they didn't stop. By the time they burst into the open air, both of them were gasping for breath. Mark leaned against a tree, clutching his side. "That was insane," he said, looking at her with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Vera smirked, brushing dust off her armor. "You're welcome." Mark shook his head, a small laugh escaping him despite the situation. "You're something else, Vera. I'll give you that." She crossed her arms, her smirk fading into a more serious expression. "So are you. That thing wanted you for a reason. What aren't you telling me, Mark?" Mark's face darkened, the lightness gone. "It's not about me," he said quietly. "It's about what humans are capable of. That machine, it's afraid of us, of what we might become." Vera frowned, the weight of his words sinking in. "Why?" Mark met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Because we don't stop. No matter what happens, no matter what we face, we find a way to keep going. And that scares them." For the first time, Vera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the jungle air. She had always thought of humans as weak, but now she realized there was something far more dangerous about them. And for the first time, she wasn't sure whether that was a good thing or not. The ultimate test. The air was electric, charged with tension as Vera and Mark stood on the precipice of the ancient ruins core chamber. Ahead of them, the artifact pulsed with a hypnotic glow, its energy radiating in waves that made the ground tremble. The remnant eye, the machine that had hunted them relentlessly, hovered in the center, its glowing red eye fixed on them like a predator studying its prey. "This is it," Mark said, his voice low but steady. "The heart of everything." Vera tightened her grip on her weapon, her eyes locked on the artifact. It was a monolithic structure, towering and otherworldly, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt, as though the artifact itself was alive and watching them. And that, Vera gestured to the remnant, which floated silently, its sharp, angular limbs bristling with latent energy. "It's not going to let us touch it, is it?" Mark let out a dry laugh. "No, I don't think so." Vera glanced at him, her frustration mounting. "Then what's the plan, human? We can't fight that thing. Not head-on." Mark's gaze remained on the artifact. "We don't fight it. We outthink it." "Outthink it? That's your plan?" Vera snapped. "That thing is older than both of us combined, smarter than anything we've faced, and you think." "It's not perfect," Mark interrupted, his tone sharp. "It's old, Vera. Old things break. Old things have cracks. We just have to find them." Before Vera could respond, the remnant's voice echoed through the chamber, cold and emotionless. "You cannot access the artifact. Leave or be eliminated." Mark stepped forward, ignoring the warning. "We're not going anywhere," he said, his tone calm but firm. "You don't want us here because we're a threat. That means we're staying." The remnant's red eye flared, and the chamber shook as its limbs extended, glowing with deadly energy. "Your defiance is irrelevant. You will not succeed." Vera stepped up beside Mark, her armor gleaming in the artifact's light. "If you think we're just going to walk away, you don't know humans, or Xarthans." The remnant hesitated, its red eye flickering. For a moment, Vera thought she saw something almost like doubt in its movements. Mark took advantage of the pause, turning to Vera. "The artifact, it's some kind of power source. If we activate it, it'll overload and destroy the remnant. But there's a catch." "Of course there is," Vera muttered. "What's the catch?" Mark hesitated, his jaw tightening. "The activation sequence isn't automated. It requires a living being to manually input the final command. Whoever does it won't make it out." Vera stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "You're saying it's a suicide mission?" Mark nodded. One of us has to stay behind. The chamber trembled again, and the remnant moved closer, its voice cold and unyielding. You will not survive. Resistance is futile. Vera's mind raced. She had always seen herself as the strongest, the most capable. But now, standing beside Mark, she realized strength wasn't enough. Sacrifice, courage, and trust. Those were the traits that truly defined a warrior. I'll do it, she said suddenly, stepping forward. Mark grabbed her arm. No, you won't. She turned to him, her yellow eyes blazing. You're human. Fragile. Weak. I'm Sarthan. I can take the risk. Mark shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. This isn't about who's stronger, Vera. It's about who can finish the job. You're the better fighter. If I go, you'll have a better chance of getting out alive and taking down whatever's left of this thing. Vera opened her mouth to argue, but the look in Mark's eyes stopped her. For once, there was no cocky grin, no teasing smirk, just resolve. Don't waste this, he said quietly, before turning and sprinting toward the artifact. Mark, no, Vera shouted, but it was too late. The remnant reacted instantly, its limbs lashing out at Mark. But he was faster, weaving through the attacks with a precision that made Vera's heart race. He reached the artifact and began inputting the activation sequence, the symbols lighting up under his touch. The remnant shrieked, its voice distorted and furious. You will not interfere. Vera didn't think. She moved. With a roar, she charged the remnant, slamming into it with all her strength. The impact knocked it off balance, giving Mark the precious seconds he needed. Vera, get out of here, Mark yelled, his voice strained. I'm not leaving you, she shouted back, dodging the remnant's counterattack. The artifact's glow intensified, filling the chamber with blinding light. The air crackled with energy, and the ground shook violently. Vera, Mark's voice cut through the chaos. Go. For a moment, she hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to stay, to fight, to not abandon him. But then she saw the determination in his eyes, the unshakable resolve of someone who had already made peace with his fate. With a guttural growl, Vera turned and sprinted toward the exit. The last thing she heard was Mark's voice, calm and steady, as he completed the sequence. Sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to win. The explosion rocked the jungle, a blinding wave of energy that consumed the ruins and everything within them. Vera barely made it out, the force of the blast throwing her to the ground. She lay there for a long moment, staring at the sky, her chest heaving. When she finally stood, the ruins were gone. The artifact, the remnant, everything had been wiped away. But Mark was gone too. Vera clenched her fists, her heart heavy. He had proven her wrong in every way that mattered. And now, she would carry his sacrifice with her, a reminder of what it truly meant to be strong. Because Mark hadn't just survived, he had won.